Hey, I'm Jesse Rass, and you've jumped inside the vast comic book world of the Pull Bag, only on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Saying anything?
Not a word.
Just get him here. We're low on time.
I don't like it.
What, Rock of Ages giving up so easily?
I don't remember it being that easy. This guy packs a wallop.
Still, you are pretty spry for an older fellow.
What you think, Pilates? What?
It's like calisthenics. You might have missed a couple things, doing time as a capsicle.
Can you believe it? It's been 5 years or so since the Pull Bag started here on the Geekcast Radio Network. Hey everybody, TFG and Mike here, and this is episode 140 of the Pull Bag. It's actually going to be a fairly short episode. I'm going to be very honest and very blunt. I put out, every so often I think, let's put out a GCRN press release to kind of get information out about certain things we're going to be doing over at the GCRN and things like that. And with this being the 5th year anniversary of the Pull Bag, I thought, let's get people to send in MP3 clips to tell us why, how comics make them feel, what comics make them feel, what comics mean to them. And I only got 2 clips from people, which you'll hear here in a bit. So I'm kind of disappointed with everybody. I've got over 1,000 Twitter followers. I've got 387 Facebook friends. And I get it. People are busy. They're off doing their own thing and everything else. But it's one of those things where I'm not asking for a lot. I mean, a clip that's 10 minutes or less that you can record on an iPhone or something, But 5 years of the Pull Bag, I can't believe the podcast has been going on this long. We've covered so much in 5 years. We've had so many Origins episodes, so many Back Issue Classics episodes, so many regular numbered episodes. I'm 60 away from 200 on the regular numbered episodes as of this recording for the Pull Bag. If you add in the Back Issue Classics, the Origins, the After Darks, and everything, I know it's already over 200, but just anyone that has known me more than 2 years knows that I have a weird thing with numbering and doing certain things in a certain way, and sometimes that frustrates people and sometimes it doesn't. Before I play the clips of the 2 people that sent the clips in, I'm just going to tell you what comics mean to me. As a kid, I knew about comics and I knew of comics, and I knew that's where Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and Iron Man and all that stuff had come from. But as a kid, I was more, watching the cartoons or watching the movies or whatever. I wasn't really reading comics as a kid. The whole reason why the Pull Bag got started, it's all Steve Megatron's fault. He had read, because, we're both big into Batman, DC Animated Universe, the Bruce Timm stuff, and Mark Hamill is the Joker, and Kevin Conroy is Batman and all that. And he had read Batman number 13 from the New 52 run of Batman, which was the start of the Death of the Family arc, where the Joker comes back and everything else. And I read his review, and I read the comic myself, and I read a few other Spider-Man, like when Amazing Spider-Man was hitting issue 700 and they were going to end the series, so I read that, and Spada and I talked about that on a special Geekcast radio episode before the Pull Bag started. So yeah, I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years, I've come to have a very interesting perception and opinion on comic books. I love reading comics. It just depends on what comic it is. Any of the Batman Beyond stuff that's been done from DC in the last, 5 or 10 years or so, love that stuff. IDW rules the licensed properties like Turtles and Transformers and things like that. Even some of the other stuff that IDW does that is creator-owned, like Tom Zoller's Long Distance or Love and Capes or, other stuff like that. Ryan Ferrier's Dave series, Hot Damn, and that kind of stuff. Love that. Even when Nicole and I, when Beatles Diva and I did the My Little Pony coverage, I did very much enjoy that, and I am so not a brony whatsoever. DC's He-Man coverage that A. Baron and I have been doing for a while now. I just love reading comics. I know this is going to be sacrilegious to some people. I almost love reading comics more than I love reading actual novels. I mean, I grew up reading. For me, reading books, actual books, folks, not comics, but actual books I started out with, as most every child of the 80s did, the Berenstain Bears and all that, and then I moved into the Hardy Boys Case Files, not the regular Hardy Boys series, but the Case Files series, where Frank and Joe were a little older, a little wiser, that kind of thing. And then I eventually found, like, R.L. Stine's Fear Street. Look, I get it, people love Goosebumps. I don't like Goosebumps. That's not one of my favorite things, and then it's no disrespect to R.L. Stine, that just wasn't my... I've often, with books, if somebody presents me with a choice, I go one way and not the other, and I stay on that one path. So I love the Fear Street books from R.L. Stine. I love most of the 90s stuff that John Grisham wrote for his legal thrillers and things. I haven't read a Grisham novel in years at this point. I've told this story before. When I was living in Mississippi in the year 2001, I was new to the area, and they had a Books A Million there, and one of the ladies that was there said, okay, I'll give you a choice. You can either read this new book series, or this series that's been out for a while about a boy wizard, or you can read this series about a former lingerie buyer turned bounty hunter. Now, come on, people. Why the hell would I want to read a book about a boy wizard when I can read a book about a former lingerie buyer turned bounty hunter? Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum series is amazing. Anyway, back to comics. For me, what comics mean is that it is a world that sucks you in through the story and the art. Whether you have a favorite character, whether you have a favorite series, whether if you're like some people that like Captain America, if you're some people that like Wolverine stories or Spider-Man, and it's not just superheroes. Look, again, I'm going to reference Tom Zoller's Long Distance, the 4-issue story that he wrote up about Carter Blue and Lee Smith, about a long-distance relationship. Again, a creator-owned title, and it's one of those things where I've read that comic, and I kid you not, folks, it has been over 100 times since those 4 issues have been out that I've read that comic. I go back to that, and I just enjoy it so much. Amy, Nicole, and I have done doing the Gem comics from IDW and everything else. What is so great about comics is that they pull you in, just like regular books do. Like, I could turn on some low music as a kid, whatever, pop rock or whatever, just in the background, have background noise, and I could sit there in a chair or on my bed or whatever, and I could be reading a book, and my brain just jumps right into the story. Like, I imagine myself as a fly on the wall in that story. It's the same thing with comics, folks. I can see myself as a observer of comics when I jump into these stories, when I have moments of, oh my God, they really did that. Like coming up when JT and I do the Batman Beyond books for Batman month in May. The current series, the 2016 series, the Rebirth series that just launched, it's got Dan Jurgens on writing as it had with the 2015 series. In the 2016 series, in the 3rd and 4th or 5th issue of that series, Dan does certain things that reference the Batman Beyond television show, and it makes me feel so wonderful reading something that someone is writing that they're paying. And I know they're paying attention to it, but the fact that they reference something as little as the date of the first air date of the first episode of Batman Beyond in 1999. That kind of thing. So that's what comics mean to me. We're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear from my buddy Jesse Raz, and you're also going to hear from Jeremy Fine from Hunnick Outcast podcast. And I'll be back at the end to close this out.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Hello, Geekcast Radio Network listeners. Hunnick Outcast here. What do comics mean to me? Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know if I can answer this in 10 minutes. I'm going to have to give you the abridged version. But it's not that I have a short attention span, and it's hard to explain, but anytime that I get my hands on any type of book, and joking aside, like Gaston and from Beauty and the Beast would say there are no pictures, I have to visualize everything that I'll read in a large or small print book. It doesn't matter what the book is. I need to see it visualized as well to match, because otherwise I'll just take the book, keep it on my lap, visualize it, and it'll take me forever to finish anything. And isn't that the point of books? The visualizations? But I also have to appreciate the illustrators, the layout artists, the pencilers, the inkers, background artists. I mean, comic books started off just being in Sunday papers and just meant for either kids or eventually adults, and they started off as these 3-panel to 8-panel jokes to character development. But does one have anything to do with the other? There's a difference between the Sunday funnies or the newspaper columns to comic books / graphic novels. Again, I could give you an answer, I just can't give you the answer that you want because it'll take forever. But I will say this much. I started off with Charlie Brown because I love the characters. I started off with Charlie Brown because it was relatable. When I got older, I would say between the time that Superman and Batman were coming onto the big screen, I'd go to my library or my local comic book store and pick up a comic here or there. But you have to understand, since it's very hard even then and now, whether DC wants to work on the reprints or not, because I'm sure there are royalty issues or whatever the case may be, you're never going to get Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze, and New 52 and Rebirth for the DC coming out in separate volumes. DC tries it every now and then, but I don't think it ever really works. You get compilations or trade paperbacks, but it's hard. And for the Golden and Silver Age of DC, and I guess Marvel, if Marvel also has a Golden Age and Silver Age, the writing was meant more towards kids. And it feels, I'm not going to take anything away from the writers, but I guess I understood. I guess they figured their audience was just for 8 to 10-year-olds, and that was pretty much it. But then when Bronze Age and New 52 and Rebirth came along, the writing's a little bit tighter. So I appreciate Bronze Age to present for DC. Marvel, it's... The problem with Marvel, it gets so clustered and flustered with what age they're working on, whether it's Marvel Now or because they're so content with their Earths. Because I think there's Earth 616, and then there's 2055, and then there's a separate one for the MCU, and then there's all these different series that I can't keep track anymore. And then everybody seems to be getting a comic nowadays. I have nothing against Howard the Duck or spin-offs or miniseries, but Marvel has just overwhelmed me. DC, I feel... I still ask these idiotic questions, because what's the difference between Action Comics and Superman and Detective Comics and Batman? And then, of course, I know there's Legends of the Dark Knight, and there's Gotham City Central. And I haven't gotten started with Supergirl or Blue Beetle or Wonder Woman or, all of that. So, what do comics mean to me? God. It's an abundance of just, I guess, the illustrations, the writing, some of the characters you can relate to, some you can't. it's really hard to say in this time frame. But I think what it means to me is escapism. And just, I can be at a certain age and read a picture book and not feel like I'm 6 years old. I just pretty much have picked up a lot of comic books over the years just for the visuals and just trying to put them on my desktop on my PC or my tablet. I mean, currently right now I'm reading Deadpool because of the movies, and I watch the movies, and some are faithful adaptations and some aren't. And one good thing about a bad adaptation of a comic book movie, you can always go back and read the comic book or the graphic novel and see what it really was supposed to be. People have issues with Batman v Superman and then some, so I was able to go back and pick up a couple trade paperbacks of World's Finest from the 50s and 60s about, how Batman and Superman really met, and I've discussed that a couple of times on my podcast. Deadpool, the same thing, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. But I also feel bad for the writers, because a lot of them from the 30s until now, some of them got screwed because of that book, Seduction of the Innocent. Some got screwed after Seduction of the Innocent because comic book companies were still somehow screwing writers and artists for a very long time. I think after Bronze Age, or during Bronze Age in the 70s to 90s, I think artists and writers somehow have been able to... I want to say between the 80s and 90s, I think artists and writers are able to solidify their name in comics, I think, but don't quote me on that. I mean, there are so many great writers out there that I can think of. Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, of course, Stan Lee and Bill Finger. I mean, there are so many that I can think, and some you probably never even heard of, because they're also the independent comics now. We have Image. IDW is very good for the nostalgia factors. I mean, even Marvel back in the 80s had something called Star Comics, where they tried to make these mini-series, type of comics just for kids. Like, they came out with Muppet Babies. Well, it was loosely based on a TV show, but you get the idea. And Top Dog, and... God, there were just all these great ideas. Just visit your local comic book store, and you can just see what comics have meant to people over the years, and what these artists, or go to a comic book convention, just sit down and talk to an illustrator or an writer. They're not all pompous. I mean, I've met a couple comic book artists and creators that are mainstream that won't give you the time of day, but it is what it is. But what do comics mean to me? I have so many... You know what? I quote from the Joker. Sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's that way, but I just prefer it to be multiple choice. But I do appreciate what Geekcast Radio The Pullbag has done. I've guested on it a few times. I miss it. There's still some ideas that I want to collaborate that... Well, currently I reviewed a comic book movie, and its comic book adaptation, its prequels, Cool World, which is rather interesting. So, with that said, make a great escape into comics, and goodbye, folks. Have a nice life.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
Jeremy, dude, you sound like you're so depressed. You need something to brighten up your day. Now, here's Jesse Raz.
Still alive.
Slept for 70 years, sir. I think I've had my fill.
Then you should be out, celebrating, seeing the world.
I went under. The world was at war. I wake up, they say we won. They didn't say what we lost.
We've made some mistakes along the way, some very recently.
You here with a mission, sir?
I am
Trying to get me back in the world?
trying to save it.
Hydra's secret weapon.
Howard Stark fished that out of the ocean when he was looking for you. He thought what we think. The Tesseract could be the key to unlimited, sustainable energy.
All right, what do comics mean to me? All right, well, first, hey, this is Jesse Rass. I am a morning show co-host on The Morning Play on 106.9 Play in Louisville, Kentucky. And what do comics mean to me? Well, they mean a lot to me. They're a big part of my identity. I do some cosplaying as Captain America and some other superheroes. But for me, growing up, comic books kind of helped define that sense of right and wrong. Not that I didn't have good influences in my life from, actual people, but, that sort of selflessness, that heroic sense that it's kind of become a part of myself. That is where I got a lot of that from comic books. And actually, I wear a Green Lantern ring every day, not just because I think it's cool and he's one of my favorite superheroes, but kind of a core philosophy for me has always been overcoming my fears, never letting fear dictate my life. And that's kind of something that I did pick up from Green Lantern, or at least I recognized that there were similarities there. A Green Lantern isn't inherently fearless. They have the ability to overcome great fear. That, for me, has been a driving force. Never let fear stop me from doing anything that I want to do. So I've jumped out of airplanes. I've done stand-up comedy. I talk to tens of thousands of people on the radio all the time. And it scares me. But you know what? I don't let the fear dictate my life. And so comics have had a huge influence with me. I'm a father now, and I can't wait to share those kind of stories, that kind of influence with him. I hope he really likes comic books. I mean, knowing my luck, he'll be really into sports, and which is something I don't know very much about. But I'm looking forward to eventually sharing some of my trades with him and just getting him to read. That's the other thing. I got my sisters. I have younger sisters. I got them some Teen Titans trades way back in the day, just as a kind of a way to get them to do some reading, and kind of helped them along with that. So I think comic books can really have that that kind of influence on people, especially kids that, books maybe not their thing. If you can get them to read comic books, eventually they'll want those richer stories that don't necessarily happen in comic books. So you can get them that way. And that for me also was something that happened too, is it helped me get into reading a little bit more. So, I mean, comics are a huge part of who I am and who I continue to be. Comic books have kind of become a great unifier too. It used to be comic book nerds weren't the popular ones. Well, with the advent of the movies and everything, comic book nerds have become the sort of popular thing. And it's funny, I used to live in New York City and I worked for Abercrombie and Fitch, which you wouldn't think there would be too many comic book nerds in there, but I used to sit in the break room and just sort of let my nerd flag fly. I'd sit, on the floor and I'd read comic books on my break. And it was amazing. The people that I never thought in a million years, based on stereotypes, were into comic books, they'd stop me and go, "Oh, I just picked up that issue," or "Oh, man." And we'd have all these conversations. I made so many friends just on the fact that I was sitting there reading a comic book that either they were familiar with or they wanted to be familiar with. So that's a pretty cool story. And that's kind of what comic books have been to me. There are a lot of people that don't know what the heck you're talking about. They don't care. My brother-in-law. But more often than not, when they see that, they think, "Oh, it's a very approachable thing about somebody." And suddenly you have something in common. You have a base reference and you start getting along. So comic books, huge part of my life. I mean, they're a huge part of who I am. Even if I don't ever read another comic book, the influence they've had on me and who I am today is just immense.
Penny for your thoughts, Spider-Man. I mean you no harm. I just want to talk.
I've heard all I want to hear from you X people. Excuse me. This is getting expensive.
All right, folks, I am back here inside the Pull Bag, episode 140. Thank you so much to Jesse Raz and to Jeremy Fine. Jeremy, dude, like I said, you need something to brighten up your life. You sound like you're so disappointed and sad. And I swear at the end of that, when you're like, goodbye, folks, have a nice life, I swear I thought you said, have a nice knife. And I'm like, a nice knife? What the hell? So again, as I said at the very beginning of this podcast episode, I'm kind of disappointed I didn't get more responses on what comics mean to you. But thank you to Jeremy and to Jesse for sending in the clips that they sent in. Coming up in the Pull Bag, we've got a bunch of stuff. Turtles, Transformers, Batman, more Hadrian's Wall, more, what else? Stuff. Coming up after this, we've got TMNT 61 to 64, which is the Street Phantom, and then after that we've got the new series Geek Girl, which Steve Megatron will be on with me. Sorry to cut this short, folks, but I had to get this episode out. Make your great escape into comics, and we will catch you next time.
You've just heard the latest episode of the Pull Bag, the GCRN's comic review and discussion podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for, and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. Send us an email feedback at geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio. So until next time, make your great escape into comics and unleash the geek in you.